All the way back in the prehistoric year of 2009, dear old 11-year-old me asked my grandmother to buy me Final Fantasy XIII. For some reason, I vividly remember playing this game. I can see my room, my PS3, my TV, everything. Not sure why. But this also means I remember dropping the game in Chapter 5, the Lightning and Hope chapter. Why? I don't remember, funnily enough. But since then, the game has garnered this propaganda base. A very vocal minority of people who have either not played the game, or played it so long ago, they don't actually remember what the game is like. I fell into that propaganda hole. I've repeated things that are not true about the game. I kept seeing the game in the Steam sales for £5 and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do what most gamers are too scared to do. Form my own opinion. So that's what I've done. And to be very honest with you, I loved it. It really felt like the culmination of everything the 3D Final Fantasy games were leading to. Let's start with the combat. This game is very much what Final Fantasy should be in this regard. You have the ATB system, which was present throughout the whole 3D era up to this point. You have 10 sphere grid system in the form of the Crystarium. You have 10-2's dress sphere system as the paradigm system. Final Fantasy as a franchise should be taking what came before and tweaking it to fit the vision of the new development team. It all comes together in such a fun and interesting way. I'm someone who loves the idea of the job system in Final Fantasy. It's a quintessential RPG mechanic, picking a class. While games like 10-2 and 12 have a wide range of jobs to choose from, 12 even lets you dual class, which I love, by the way. 13 goes in the opposite direction. The game has 6 jobs total, which each character eventually gains access to all of them. Each character starts with 3 of the 6 jobs, and one of those 3 being their main role. All main role means is that going through the Crystarium tree gives you the most stats, and towards the end you get an additional ATB bar for 5 total. When you eventually gain access to all jobs, the secondary jobs don't have as many nodes, so that means less stats, but more importantly, you don't get all abilities. So for example, Hope is a synergist. This role is for buffing the party. Things like bravery and faith that increase strength and the magic stat respectively. Hope gets them towards the end of the game. Saz gets them as his very first abilities. Then you have Lightning and Fang, who don't have Synergist as any of their main 3. Lightning has access to Bravery and Faith, but not Bravera and Faithra. Fang has access to Bravera and Faithra, but not Bravery and Faith. I love this because it incentivizes strategizing who you build and who you use. It's not a perfect system because there is a lot of overlap once you're maxed out, but most importantly, 2 characters will never be identical. Now, the problem with this is that in the early game, the party is constantly being split up for story reasons. So you'll have chapters where Saz and Vanille are together. Saz gets essential buffs through Synergist really early, and Vanille gets essential debuffs like D-Protect and D-Shell through Saboteur very early. These chapters are great, but then they end and then you go to a chapter with Lightning and Hope. Where Saz starts off as an offensive synergist, Hope starts off as a defensive synergist. So in these Lightning and Hope chapters, you are missing essential buffs. And because neither have Saboteur in their main 3 jobs, you miss essential debuffs too. And I get it. This is done to teach the player about the different roles and how they interact with each other, and to let the player mess around with the different paradigm shift setups. This would be a fine assumption if it lasted maybe a few hours. I didn't get full access to all 6 party members until the 18-hour mark. Just for context, my full playthrough of the main story was 40 hours. I spent roughly 4-5 hours grinding XP, so let's say 35 hours. So that is roughly half of my playthrough being a tutorial, which kind of sucks because despite being someone who isn't really a fan of ATB, I think 13's combat system is one of the best. Yes, I know you don't control the whole party in battle, but that doesn't matter because you should always be paradigm switching for the ATB refresh, which by the way is one of the only reasons why I like the ATB system here. Your first paradigm shift fully refreshes the ATB gauge to max. Then for the rest of combat, it becomes available every 12 seconds. It's a very active system and it feels great. Timing your switches so your party members attack and keep the staggered enemy juggled while you hold back, then attack while your party member's ATB gauge recharges feels amazing. Seriously, I love this combat system. It is easily the most satisfying feedback loop of any of the Final Fantasy games I've played. I mentioned the stagger system. If you've seen my 7 Remake, 7 Rebirth or 16 video, you would know that I despise the stagger bar. I think in general it's a system that punishes the player. It makes the enemy or bosses take less damage until you've depleted the stagger bar. It feels bad because you don't have anything specifically in your kit to deal with stagger. You just have damage. So in reality it becomes a shield or a pseudo invincibility phase. Final Fantasy XIII has Ravager, a role that is specifically designed to do less damage but fill that stagger bar as fast as possible. Once staggered, it also increases the stagger percent to do more damage. This is a good way to do stagger. I would go as far as to say that this is the only time stagger has felt good in any of the games it's present in. All of this comes together really well to make a super satisfying combat system. It upsets me that Final Fantasy as a franchise is so prone to just throwing away old systems and mechanics. Imagine where Final Fantasy as a franchise would be today if 13 was still built upon. Imagine 13's battle system with more job options, an expanded crystarium so it's not just a linear tree and you're able to build out your job how you want like in 12. I'm salivating at the potential of what that RPG could be. Before I move on, there were some things I didn't like or just didn't care about. Summons. Wouldn't be a Final Fantasy without them. I don't think I used them of my own volition. There's some forced summon use sections in the story, but they cost a lot of TP to summon outside of that. I love their designs, they look very cool. I just felt like I was more efficient in combat not using them. Unfortunate because the animations are really cool. Finally, I hate the scoring system. It's so poorly implemented and it's never really explained to you. Thankfully, the ranking system doesn't really matter, at least as far as I could tell anyway. The higher rank you got, the higher chance you got rarer drops from monsters. But it still felt bad at times. You fight a boss or stronger enemy, it feels like you downed it pretty quick, didn't spend too much time healing and buffing, and then get hit with a 3-star rank. It doesn't feel great. And then I find out the ranking system is dynamic, meaning the stronger I got through crystarium or weapon upgrading, the less time I got to achieve that 5-star rank. So in a way, I was being punished for getting stronger in a role-playing game. Someone told me that you're supposed to use a mix of lower level weapons and accessories to make 5-star ranks more consistent. It just felt needlessly punishing. Okay, finally, I just want to quickly shout out this very old guide I found for Final Fantasy XIII. I found out so much about this game's mechanics through this, like the ATB refresh, which I'm pretty sure you're not told about this in the game, by the way. I think this guide is almost essential in many ways, so I'll link it in the description below. Before I move on to talk about the story, I want to talk about the boogeyman of Final Fantasy XIII. The accursed linearity. Depending on which YouTube funny man you watch, you may believe that this is the worst game to ever exist due to this. I will concede that 13 is a very linear game. However, I want to pose a question to you. Is Final Fantasy X bad? That's a very linear game, probably equally so. Are 15 and 16 bad for their empty worlds and mindless quest marker to quest marker gameplay? The answer to those questions is no, by the way. Those games are praised and criticised for a wide range of things. So why is 13 almost completely written off for being linear? Many consider 10 to be the best Final Fantasy game. Others, like myself, consider it to be one of the greatest games ever made. So why is there a discrepancy in its criticism? Why is one bad and one good based on one aspect of the game? I just don't understand it. Yes, it's linear. I've already conceded that. But every 30 to 45 minutes, you are getting some of the most beautiful locations presented in any Final Fantasy. You are getting some of the best drama, character moments, relationship building, and cinematics within the entire franchise. And you are complaining? I'm sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. I think some of the criticisms of this game is really dumb. if you're not also talking about the rest of the game and what it offers. Well, now that's done, let's move on to the story. Unfortunately, I don't really like being analytical of stories. I much prefer to talk about the gameplay of games, but I'm going to try and talk about this the best I can. Overall, I loved this game's story. In a way, it's very reminiscent of Final Fantasy X. Going on a journey in an attempt to end the cycle of suffering and pain once and for all. Someone has to sacrifice themselves to ensure it all happens correctly. There's a corrupt religion orchestrating the whole thing. I think what I loved the most is that the game doesn't hold back in telling you a story. This game has a lot of cutscenes and a lot of downtime, but it never takes you out of the game. That's because the writing is really good. I love every single character. I love their character arcs. I love the relationships they built over the course of the game. You remember in the gameplay section where I mentioned how the game constantly splits your party up and how much I didn't like that? From a narrative perspective, I loved it. It is without a doubt the best part of this game's narrative. The groups for a majority of this is Lightning and Hope, and then Saz and Vanille. The dynamic between these groups is amazing. At the start of the game, Hope's mother volunteers to fight with Snow, which results in her dying, which he sees happen. So from that point onwards, he has this animosity towards Snow and vows to kill him out of revenge. Contrast that with Lightning, who is very stoic, keeps to herself. I would go as far as say that she is antisocial. She's seen what the Sanctum is capable of. She saw Sarah turn into a crystal and vowed revenge on the Sanctum. Both of these characters are driven by revenge, but that desire for revenge comes from vastly different places. Hope is 14 years old. He doesn't understand revenge and its nuances. When Lightning tells him that he shouldn't blame Snow but the Sanctum, he says he'll kill them both. Lightning is much older. She's more mature. She served in the Guardian Corps. She understands that Hope is channeling his anger the wrong way. Saz and Vanille are like this too. They both have secrets. Saz in general wants to keep Darge anonymous from the group, and Vanille is from Grand Pulse. They're enemies. Vanille is also the reason why Darge becomes a lessee in the first place. Just like Hope and Lightning, these two slot together perfectly narratively as well. This works because these characters' stories get the opportunity to breathe. There's no one from the party or outside of the party influencing them. When Saz finds out that Vanille and Fang caused Darge to become a lessee, and he confronted Vanille at Nautilus, do you think it would feel the same if Lightning, Snow, and Hope were off to the side, influencing one way or the other? No. That would make the scene so much worse. The reason Saz confronting Vanille is so good is because it is exclusively those two. Vanille accepts that she is in the wrong for what happened to Darge and fully understands the reasoning why Saz wants to kill her. Saz coming to the conclusion that killing Vanille would change nothing on his own makes him and his story arc significantly stronger and more impactful. If the narrative had these characters together at all times, there would be scenarios that had to take away from a moment to prop someone else up. And when these characters do finally come together, their character arcs are mostly complete. Everyone is locked in on taking the Sanctum down. It's great. I love it. One final thing I want to bring up is the criticism of the story being behind the data log. I don't really understand this criticism. I looked at the data log for things like Pulse and Sanctum Falsi because for a bit at the start I got confused at the difference, but that's it really. In general, I paid attention to the story and pieced it all together myself. There's a difference between lore and story. The game gives you everything you need to understand the story through cutscenes and the events of the game. If I'm missing something from the story that's only explained in the data log, then please tell me in the comments because I really didn't feel like that was necessary. All in all, I think Final Fantasy XIII has quickly become one of my favourite games of all time. Probably doesn't quite reach my top 10 though. Some of the criticisms this game receives seem somewhat misguided. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. no game is. But you see the way people talk about it on social media, and you can just tell they haven't played it or just haven't played it in a very long time. All I'm saying is play games for yourself. Make up your own mind, and I promise you will be a better person for it. I love you, Final Fantasy XIII. Now, let's see if your 2 sequels keep this up.